Hi, I'm Dan Curry. I'm part of the Centerville History Group. I'm sitting here this morning with Miss Dixie Puckett Lawrence, a longtime native of Centerville, moved here back when she was a small child. So, Ms. Lawrence, let me ask you, what can you tell me about your family life? Let's take it from the point about the time you moved to Centerville. I know you moved from Winder to Centerville. So, what was family life like back then?
Well, it was very rural.
What year was this?
This was 1931.
1931.
I was 9 or 10, and I'm 95, by the way.
A very young, youthful 95.
Thank you. And we just moved here from Barrow County, where I was born. So, what would you like to ask me?
Well, what was family life back in those days here in the country?
Yes.
Gosh, that was back during the Depression.
Absolutely.
Now I
in
know
the middle of the Depression.
I know in reading some of the history you provided us, I think one of your brothers, Hayden, and along with an uncle, drove a 2-horse wagon from Winder to Centerville.
Furniture in it.
And you and the rest of the family, your father and mother, and some siblings, y'all came in your car, which you said was a 1929.
Willis Overland or something like that.
Okay.
Sort of a sporty.
And then once you arrived in Centerville, what did you think? I mean, did you?
Oh, I was very. I looked forward to it, but when I first saw the house coming around the curve, I was disappointed. It looked drab and dreary, and the day was waning, And the first glance I had of this house right in front of this one, it just looked scary. It looked really scary. But it turned out to be a very warm place. And being a girl, I guess I always loved flowers. And somebody had planted rose bushes on each side of the steps going down to the mailbox. And there were all kinds of fruit trees, nut trees around. And my family they were farmers, of course, and my job was babysitting. There were 6 of us, and so I was the storyteller, the entertainer. My dad taught me how to babysit. He would tell me how precious these children were that I was babysitting, and so the children, my siblings, grew to love me because I would read all kinds of books like Tom Sawyer and other things to them, and tell them stories that I had read in other books. So I have very warm memories of that, and they do too. They did too. I'm the last sibling that survived.
There were six children in the family, plus your parents.
Yes.
And you had quite a sizable farm here too.
Oh yes, it was over 100 acres. It was like 130 or 50 or something like that. It went all the way almost to Centerville. It went just past the country store that's out there, or the store, gas station. And yes.
What type crops did you grow on your farm?
Oh, my dad was what they called a progressive farmer. He grew everything we ate: watermelons, cantaloupes, tomatoes, beets, sweet potatoes, sugar cane, or I guess that's what it was. We made syrup.
Syrup cane, I guess that would be.
And I loved all the fruits. I didn't care much for vegetables. I grew peas and corn, and I loved corn, but I didn't like the vegetables much. I liked the fruits. But we were never hungry, and
You probably had some livestock too, I guess.
oh yes,
Cows, or maybe a mule, a horse,
a horse,
pigs, chickens.
yes, everything.
Typical farm life.
Yes, yes,
And I know you had a barn here on this farm. We'll get back to that a little bit later because that barn has served in multiple areas as the family progressed, hasn't it?
yes, it surely did.
But back in the early days, around 1931, well, during the 1930s, you know, we look around here today, we see subdivisions and houses, but it was a much sparse terrain back then.
Right,
I mean, you might maybe a house every quarter of a mile, sometimes a half a mile. But
right.
who were some of your neighbors back then
Oh,
in the 30s?
well, the Masons lived down below us. As we were talking about a while ago, Dr. Miles Mason would live down on the family farm, and we walked to school together. We graduated from high school together. And his cousins, David and Mary, graduated with me from high school. And let me see, the Boozers, who lived across the road from me.
Well, that would have been my wife's family, Nancy's family.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were great neighbors. They really were. I'm not saying that to, but they really were great neighbors. And let's see, who else lived down there? The Nortons. Bill Norton, and he was, let's see, his older brother was in my class. Oh, his name escapes me now.
You also had, I believe, the McCullers family.
Yes.
Miss May McCullers and her
Yes.
family
Yes.
lived nearby.
Yes, they did.
A lot of people.
Uh-huh.
I recall, matter of fact, I shared with our historical group a couple of months ago. I have a book that I guess you might call it a memory book or something.
Yes.
That the seniors. Well, my mother was a senior in Centerville. The students, and if I'm not mistaken, you wrote. I know your brother Hayden wrote a little passage in there, but you write those wishes,
Yes.
little poems maybe.
Yes.
I should have brought that with me today.
Yes.
But do you remember those memory books
Yes,
that they
I
did
do.
back then?
Yes.
You write little catchy phrases.
Yes.
And yeah, a lot of people.
They're very precious memory books.
Yes.
They really were.
Yes. Now you attended Centerville Elementary School.
Yes.
And of course, back in the time that you were in school, it only went from grade 1
Through the 10th grade.
through the 10th grade. And then if you wanted to go to the 11th grade, you had to go to Snellville for the 11th grade. And there wasn't a 12th grade
No.
back then.
No, that's right.
So that's good times.
Yeah.
Now again, let's talk about your family and how things changed over the years. You had, let's see, your sister,
Doris.
Doris. She worked at the state capitol for.
Oh, yeah.
She worked and retired there.
That's right. She worked for the Internal Revenue Department.
Okay.
She was a whiz in math, and she met a lot of famous people there.
Mhm.
And
And now you married Mr. What was his first name?
Bob.
Bob Lawrence.
Uh-huh.
And I think he was an electrical contractor or supplier, or was it electrical or?
Well, he went to school. Let me get my thoughts together here. He graduated from the 10th grade, but he was very intelligent, and he applied to Georgia Tech and made the highest grade in math that had ever been made at that time.
Really?
So he was a whiz at math, and I didn't like math. I loved drama and reading and writing and things like that. So he was in World War II, and he was shot down over enemy territory. He was the tail gunner in the Air Force, and the plane was shot through the middle. They said it looked like a sieve when they got to it, and so he was wounded. He was in Guadalcanal, the Solomon Islands, and all over there. And let me see. So he was wounded so badly he didn't go back. So that he came home in 1943. He was wounded in 42, I believe. And he came back home in 1943. And he was let me ask me another question.
That's okay. Now you had what was it? You had four brothers, right?
Yes.
Let's see, there was Hayden and Richard and Otis and Wiley. Now that's not in the order.
No.
But they become very, very, very creative.
Yes, they were.
Very ambitious.
Yeah.
Now, as they were small children, did you see that characteristic in those boys? I mean, did you see that ambition that they had?
Yes. They would make, with rubber bands and empty spools from my mother's sewing machine, they would make little...
tops, I guess? Or,
yeah, well, no, it wasn't top. They would make these little things that would crawl by themselves. You wind it up on them.
Okay.
And they would make machinery
Nice.
out of rubber bands. And
Okay. Now, you had four brothers
and one sister.
and one sister, and your brothers, they became very creative and did quite well. Mm-hmm. Wiley, I guess Wiley sort of started, he developed Puckett Construction Company, and he did asphalt back in the early days. This would have been back in the 50s, and then got into concrete. And he did a lot of work throughout the metropolitan Atlanta area. Then you had two other brothers, Otis and Richard, and that's where the barn comes in.
Yes.
Now they transformed that barn where you used to have, I guess, cows, horses, mules, all this kind of stuff, chickens perhaps.
Yes.
And but they changed that to the executive offices of Puckett Brother Manufacturing Company, and I think they might have done still had some of their manufacturing going on in the lower level, but they had their executive offices upstairs. Right. And then you walk out the back door. Do you recall what they call that area right out the back door? As I recall, they called it the strawberry patch. When you walked out the back door, by then they had more building out there and more of the manufacturing part of their enterprise. But they still reference that as the strawberry patch, based on the fact that's where they grew strawberries when they were kids. So tell us about that barn and your brothers and.
Oh, I don't know. The barn was a playhouse for my brothers too, and they would jump. We had hay in the barn, and they would play and jump from. I'm not talking very well.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine.
And they would jump in from the hayloft down onto the horse and ride them bareback, you know.
Just being typical boys. Typical boys. Let's talk a little bit about some of the. I guess I'm one of those Centerville characters myself.
Yes, of course you are.
But a lot of the people you grew up with, names from the past. I mean, some of the older folks. Of course, you were around their children, but people like Arthur Darby. You remember Arthur Darby?
Oh, yes, and Dewey.
Arthur and Dewey was, of course, his son. Arthur had two sons, Dewey and J.W., right?
Right.
Yeah, they went to school with you.
Yes.
There at Centerville.
Right.
And of course, my mother was there. My mother-in-law, Ophelia Boozer. You mentioned the Boozers earlier.
Yes.
But just a lot of people here from the Centerville area. Of course, you had
The Freemans.
the Freemans,
And the Nortons.
the Nortons. That's right.
And Starnes.
They had the Starnes. That's right. That's right.
And
You had, of course, as you mentioned earlier, you had the Masons. Now let's say you were younger than Wayne. Now Wayne Mason, you knew Wayne and Jimmy quite well.
Yes. I'm older than they are, honey.
You're kind of caught in that mid generation. You're sort of caught between the generation of Wayne and the generation of his father, Winston.
Yes.
Because Winston right now would probably be, I'm going to say probably around 110 or so. My dad would be about 110. Winston's about that same age, But a lot of things were going on around that time.
Yes.
Back then, back in the 30s, Centerville was still a farming community.
Right.
Now, as we moved into the 40s, it became more of a bedroom community for people working in Atlanta and in other areas. I know you probably remember this as well, one of the major employers in the Gwinnett County area back then was a company called General Shoe.
Oh yes, I worked there.
You worked there, okay.
Almost everybody just did that.
They took a lot of young people, as yourself and my parents, took them off the farm, helped them to transition from farm life to what they called back then. Remember this term, public work?
Yes.
You don't hear that now.
No.
But back then it was referred to as public work or public jobs.
I like to think that Centerville produced a lot of good people, like Dr. Mason.
Right.
And Winston and Idabelle had wonderful children. And there were teachers, as I said, and doctors, but they all moved to Snellville. Left. So Snellville profited from Centerville's citizens.
That's right. That's right. You're exactly
Yeah.
right. But yeah, you're right, and of course, I think there was a strong work ethic in the people that grew up here.
Oh yes.
And just like your brothers, I mean, they were driven, they were successful, and your brothers, they were not engineers, but they worked with equipment, and if they could see how to improve it, they had the know-how to do it. Just that instinct. Now, and I tell people often, referencing your brothers, that people don't all like your brothers. They were not engineers, but later in life they employed engineers.
Yes.
And did quite well.
Yes.
That barn out there that we've mentioned a couple of times now, not only did it house hay, but it also housed these men who had ideas that changed the future in the paving industry.
Right, they did.
Talking with one of your nephews just recently, he was talking about the Puckett family being installed in I didn't know this, but in the Asphalt Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And he showed me this nice plaque, and I think that's a character of all the Puckett family.
Yeah. Well, I had wonderful parents. There were some wonderful people that they were. If they had had an education, they would have really gone further. But you mentioned that they were not engineers, but they were actually born engineers.
That's it.
And so I think my brothers were like that, because they were always creating new ideas into the paving industry.
If you look back into the 60s, Puckett Brothers Manufacturing Company was one of the one amongst the only manufacturing companies in Gwinnett County. I mean, there was very few. I mean, that was before people found out about Gwinnett County, and they kind of they sent stuff all over the world.
Yes,
stuff.
they did.
They shipped stuff. They shipped grading equipment and paving equipment into, I think, into Iran, and just numerous small countries, and really got the name of Gwinnett County.
Well, I remember a
throughout the world.
county paper that came out, and they had on the front page, "From Centerville to the world," or something like that.
Yes.
And that was because of what you just said.
Yeah. A lot of good things happen. Tell me about your children. Tell me. I know you have 8 children.
Yes.
Tell me about what they have done in life. I know they've been very successful as well.
Yes, but the reason that these walls are not painted is because, in the summertime, my children would come out here and sleep on the floor. There were not enough beds for them, and they loved these walls, and so they said, "Mother, please don't paint the walls."
Has a lot of character.
Yeah, I guess so. And it was completely made of wood. You know, it was built in the late 30s.
This house was built some 8 or 10 years after you first arrived in
Yes.
Centerville. You lived in a much older house for a few years.
And it was to get the mortgage. The house didn't. It was so deteriorated they couldn't get the mortgage, so he had to build a new house to get it. So that's how we got this house. But the old house was very picturesque. It had been built onto, and there's a well out here in front of my house, and it was on the back porch of the old house. So they built this house directly behind the old house. And this hill, there are several hills in Centerville, and this is one of the taller hills.
Okay.
And you could see back then, you could look at, from the front porch, we could see Stone Mountain. Beautiful view of Stone Mountain from our front porch. And so you were asking me about my children. My oldest son, Scott, he graduated from Georgia Tech, and he worked for aerospace engineers. He helped to bring the first man on the moon. He was one of the ones that helped direct them back from the moon, which was very exciting back then.
Yes.
Everybody was interested in that. And then Ronald, my second son, he worked for his dad's company and did very well. And then Richard worked for his dad's company too. Those two, Ronald and Richard, served time in the military, and I'm very proud of them. And but they I apologize.
That's quite all right. No.
I apologize.
You're doing wonderful.
And so then Rusty Russell, we call him Rusty, worked for 2 or 3 things, and Rusty is a very wonderful person, and he used to work for the mental health place. He worked there for a long time, and then he worked for Consumer Affairs, and he has long hair, and he used to go incognito or whatever you call that, and he would go to court And he should have gone to law school, but he didn't. But he would, he worked for the state, and at that time there were a lot of people who were cheating people who were buying cars, and he would go, and they would think he was just an old guy, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then he would show up in court dressed up, and they thought he was a lawyer, and so he did very well. He worked with him for 30-something years. And then there was Rebecca, my first daughter, and she studied medical anthropology, and she would have become a nurse, but she fainted every time she saw blood. So, but she has worked in the medical field. She has several degrees, and then Reed, he chose psychology, and we all teased him about that because he chose that because we teased him and said he was trying to understand his family.
Okay.
But he's a great guy, and he was a photographer for a long time, and he took many famous pictures of different things and people, from presidents to he was there when the Lowe's Grand Theater burned down in Atlanta, and got a picture of that, and so then along came Rhett, the youngest boy, and I may have mentioned him before, did I? I told you about the degrees he got.
You told me, but you didn't tell. You didn't tell our camera.
Well, he was very bright. He graduated with honors from South Gwinnett, and then he went to Oglethorpe and graduated with honors, the highest honors, and went to work. He was a CPA, and he was great with math and financial things. So he got a financial management degree, I'm sorry, old. And then he saved his money and went to Yale, and I think it was financial managed from there. Then he wanted to outdo his brothers, so he saved his money and graduated from Harvard with a law degree, contractual law,
Right.
And so he lived a great life. He was a very fine man, and he married a wonderful girl, and all my sons are married to good girls.
That's a blessing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, Ms. Lawrence, you've had a wonderful life. You had great parents, fantastic siblings, brothers and sisters, and you grew up here in a community. You saw a lot of change.
Mm-hmm.
I know you lived in East Atlanta for a number of years.
25 years.
Your husband's business was out there, and then probably 30 years ago, you moved out to moved back home to Centerville.
Daddy, all his children some land, and to build a house on. Daddy wanted us back home.
Right.
He wanted us back in Centerville. So we built a house in 1971 and moved back here. That was how we got the younger children to South Gwinnett.
Right.
And so.
And then, but although you probably still own that very nice brick home right around the corner here.
Yes.
But you wanted to come back to your roots and live in this house.
Yes, they were going to sell it to this man who was going to carve.
Redevelop.
No, he was going to sell the soil. He was going to take this hill down, and that would have paid. I really apologize for getting so
You're doing well.
tired. And he had already paid when my sister passed away. She left this house and several acres to her son, but they had financial problems, and he had to sell the house. So I bought it from him, from the man who was trying to buy it, and to save the house. My youngest son told me if I wanted the house, he could manage it for me. So I had to repair the back of the house, and we saved the house. So I moved into it. I didn't trust anybody else to live in it because I was afraid they would change it.
Yep, that's the way to preserve it. That's
Yeah.
right.
Just move on to it.
And I remember back in the day when from this hill, you could look across and you could see Stone Mountain.
Yes, it was
excellent
beautiful.
view. Excellent view from Stone Mountain.
Yeah, yes, you could sit on the front porch.
And from growing up on this hill, overlooking Highway 124, which I hear the traffic down there now as it passes by, that has changed a lot in these 75 or 80 years.
Yeah.
Back when you first moved out here, it was just a dirt path.
Right, it was.
I think it was paved about 1951.
Something like that.
If I can't remember that, but I was born in '49, so I've been told that.
Yes.
And then that was one of the only paved roads in the area.
Besides.
78 was paved,
Right.
and then they paved 124. But all these other side roads, the Johnson Drive, Campbell Road, and the list goes on, they were all dirt.
That's right.
Made it very difficult to get around back in the day, didn't
in
it?
the winter, there was a hill down on Spain Road that you couldn't get out. You know, you tear up your transmission in the car if you tried to get out in the mud. It was just pure mud.
Well, Ms. Lawrence, we've appreciated your time this morning. And by the way, I just want to comment, you look very beautiful, very patriotic too, by the way.
Yes.
Beautiful and patriotic. Got your red, white, and blue on. And that's wonderful. And again, just want to thank you for your life, your legacy, and all that you have done and meant for Centerville. I almost said Loganville because I'm the mayor of Loganville, and I grew up here in Centerville, so I have sort of dual roots, you might say.
Yes.
But Centerville has changed. It's become a thriving little unincorporated metropolis out here. Is there anything in closing, just for a moment, you'd like to just say about your life or about the area you grew up in?
I got a lot of wonderful memories, and I am thankful to my Heavenly Father for all His blessings. I couldn't have done what I did without Him, without His help and guidance. And I still say that Centerville is a wonderful place, but it has changed a lot.
It has changed.
It produced some wonderful people. It really did.
I had lunch with a good friend of ours, Wayne Mason, a few months ago, And as we talked over lunch, I told Wayne, I said, Wayne, I said, I don't, do you feel the way I do that you can't, for me, growing up in Centerville, I could not have found a better place to have grown up.
That's what I
If it was a choice, if I could look anywhere in the world, I don't think there's a better place than Centerville, again, because of those folks we discussed earlier,
Right.
those characters that
Right.
we got to, that I guess sort of mentored us. And what's the
Yes.
saying? It takes a village to raise a
Yeah.
child. And I think that there's so many people that have their fingerprint in our lives
That's
when we
right.
come up in a
That's
community as we
exactly
did.
right, Dan. Yes.
So it's wonderful. And,
Yes.
again, I appreciate your time, and you've done an outstanding job.
Well,
And I know
thank
this is something that other people will be able to share, and it'll be a tremendous benefit to
I
those
hope
who,
so.
who see this video. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And you.